So hello and welcome to a new video. Today, as you can see, I'm not in my workshop, but at my brother's property. He bought a multi-family house here. It's being completely renovated, and now I'm partly responsible for the garden. Today I'm going to build a small wall out of rubble stone. And if you're interested in how this is done, or how you can do it, or whatever, and whether it works, just stay tuned. So, before we get started with the work here, a quick overview of the construction site. As you can see, a terrace will be built here, and I'll be supporting this small slope with a rubble stone wall. Yes, of course, for a wall you also need a proper foundation. We've already prepared that. The foundation itself is 80 centimeters deep, so it's frost proof. And since everything is already finished here, we can start building the wall right away. So for the wall, as you can see, I'm using coursing stones. These aren't prefabricated rubble stones. They're, well, straight from the quarry, which makes things a bit more difficult because they all have different sizes and heights. You have to do a bit of shaping, especially on the visible sides, but then it works out quite well. Yes, with the stones you use, you should make sure, as I said, that they are coursing stones. They're rock solid and frost resistant. And here, for example, I have a particular stone that is clearly not suitable for this purpose. It is definitely not frost resistant at all. You can clearly see here, it is visibly falling apart and disintegrating right before your eyes. So this stone is not frost resistant. You shouldn't use stones like these because over the years or decades, frost will eventually destroy them. As I mentioned, all the stones have different dimensions. I've laid out blocks with almost the same height for the first row. Height differences of 2 to 3 centimeters don't matter at all here. You can easily even those out later with concrete. And since these are not processed stones, you still need to do a bit of finishing work here. Especially the edges should be straight, and of course the front side as well, so that it looks nice later on. If you want a perfectly straight edge, you can of course use an angle grinder. To do this, you first need to mark the cut. Then the whole thing is lightly scored with a stone cutting disc. You don't need to cut all the way through the stone here. 5 to 10 centimeters is enough, and then you can remove the edge precisely with a chisel. Yes, when concreting natural stone walls, you should use truss cement. Truss cement has the advantage that it doesn't cause efflorescence and is simply more weather resistant over the years than regular concrete. Alright, let's mix that up now, and then we can go ahead and continue building the wall. If you're working with larger amounts of concrete, like for this wall here, I definitely recommend using an electric mixer. I'm using a regular drum mixer here. As you can see, it's been around for a few years, but these things are basically indestructible. You can get a mixer like this for under 200 euros, and of course you can also rent the appropriate equipment at most hardware stores. Alright, and now let's move on to the mixing ratio. The sand and the quick setting cement are mixed in a ratio of 3 to 1. That means 3 shovels of sand to 1 shovel of quick-setting cement mixed together. When mixing, I always start by stirring the dry mixture first so that everything is well distributed. Then I add the water gradually, in small amounts. You should be rather sparing with the water here. When building with natural stone, you actually use earth-moist concrete mortar. Earth-moist means that its consistency is actually rather crumbly and sandy. You can easily test this by touching the concrete with a glove. If mixed correctly, the concrete should not stick to the glove at all, and yes, as mentioned, the consistency should be more sandy and crumbly. And once the concrete looks like this, earth moist, you can start concreting. I also briefly moistened the foundation right before starting. This ensures that the applied concrete mortar doesn't lose water it needs to set properly. So, I'd say let's get started. In the first step, I applied a concrete layer about 3 to 4 centimeters thick onto the foundation. The whole thing is then smoothed out with a trowel, and then you can start laying the stones. As you can see, my stones are just about the size that you can still set them by hand on your own. If your stones are larger, then I'd recommend working with a second person, or for really big stones, maybe even using an excavator. But most of my stones are actually quite manageable. As you can just about see here, I've stretched a guide string along the ground so that the wall will be straight and aligned later on. Yes, and once you've aligned the stones, you should also make sure that they sit firmly in the concrete and don't wobble. And then you just continue stone by stone until you finish the first row. So now that I've finished laying the first row of stones, I'm going to add a few filler stones in the back here, and then I'll move right on to the next layer. The filler stones are buried directly behind the wall. This ensures that the ground here remains permeable to water and that no water logging can form behind the wall. Yes, ideally gravel should be used to fill in behind the wall, but since I didn't have any gravel, I had to improvise, and I ended up burying all the old stone scraps that were left over from the construction site. And at this point, I'd also like to mention again that I'm not a trained craftsman, just a DIY enthusiast. Professionals might approach this differently, but of course this isn't the first wall I've built here. I've already built several retaining walls in my garden, and they're all still standing today, so this method will definitely work. And of course, it should also be said that this is just a 50 centimeter high wall without any major structural loads, so it's perfectly fine to proceed like this. As you can see, I've already started with the second layer of stones here. The only thing you need to pay attention to here is to always lay the stones offset from the row below so that the joints don't line up. And yeah, that way you get a nice joint pattern, and that's really the only thing you need to keep in mind here. Everything else is basically the same. Yeah, after just 3 stones, my wall is already finished in terms of height. That means I can fill in the rest here with soil. The big pile of earth in the background will of course be removed, so that there will be an even plateau behind the wall. Alright guys, the third and final layer has now been laid. I'm just going to touch up the joints here, and then the first part of the wall will be done. Touching up the joints is of course no big deal either. All you need for this is a brush and a bucket of water. The concrete should already have set a little before you start working on it, and then you can get going. As you can see, I'm just using a regular paintbrush here. The brush should only be damp, not wet, because otherwise the cement will get washed out of the concrete. And then you simply go over each joint once with the brush so that the concrete is nice and smooth everywhere and you get a clean, even look. So folks, the first part of the wall is done. I'll do the second part tomorrow. I won't be filming that anymore. It's exactly the same as what I did today. I'll show you a few pictures of the finished wall in a moment, and then that's it for today. So I have to say, I'm actually really satisfied with the wall. Considering I'm not a professional but just a DIYer, I think it turned out pretty well. It looks good, and that's the most important thing. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you were able to take something away from it again. If so, feel free to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, or write suggestions for improvement. Whatever you like. And as I said, I'm going to have a beer to end the day, and then I'm off. I wish you all the best and lots of fun with your DIY projects. I hope we'll see each other again soon for the next video. Take care. Bye.